I never believed in Santa Claus, or at least I didn't think I did, until the night I realized he was real, and that his naughty list wasn't for children. It was for anyone who had done wrong, and he wasn't giving second chances. My name is Emily, and I live in a small sleepy town in upstate New York called Millersville. The kind of place where every street glows with Christmas lights and neighbors smile a little too much like they're hiding something. It was the week before Christmas, and I had just moved into my new apartment above a bakery hoping for a quiet holiday. After a rough year, but the first sign that something was wrong came in a simple, seemingly innocent way: a knock on my door at midnight. When I opened it, there was nothing there. Just a single piece of thick cream-colored paper with elegant red ink scrawled across it. "Have you been good this year, Emily?" I laughed nervously, thinking it was a prank from one of my coworkers. But my laughter felt hollow, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Over the next few days, the knocks continued, each one accompanied by a new note, more specific each time. "Remember the lies you told in June? Do you forget the money you took that wasn't yours?" Each accusation was true, though I had never told anyone about it, and the notes left me shaken, my sleep restless, my heart racing every time the wind rattled the windows. Then the death started. First, it was Mr. Hargrove, the man who ran the corner store. He was found at the bottom of his staircase, a look of sheer terror frozen on his face. Police called it an accident, but everyone whispered differently. People said he had been on Santa's list, though no one dared say it out loud. Next, a woman named Claire, who worked at the library, was discovered in her kitchen, her body sprawled unnaturally across the floor. The coroner said it was a heart attack, sudden and unexplained, but I knew better. I had seen the way she had stared at the snow outside her window the night before she died, and she had been terrified of something. Fear had a sound, a taste even, and I could feel it now in the empty streets of Millersville. Every face I passed was pale, drawn, their eyes darting nervously as though the slightest sound could summon him. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was coincidence, that I was imagining patterns where none existed. But then, on Christmas Eve, the town went completely silent, an oppressive, unnatural quiet that wrapped around the streets like a shroud. I stayed inside, curled on the couch with a blanket pulled tight, but the jingling started that night, soft at first, like distant sleigh bells, and then louder, almost right outside my window. I crept toward it, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. And that's when I saw him, Santa Claus, or at least something that looked like him, standing on the roof across the street. His suit was crimson but torn in places, and his beard was tangled, more like brambles than hair. His eyes, glowing a cold, icy white, locked on me, unblinking and empty, and I felt the air itself freeze around me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet wouldn't move, glued to the floor by fear I didn't know I could feel. The jingling stopped. Then, a single word appeared on the snow outside my window, written in deep dark red, like blood on the white ground. Naughty. I backed away, but the next thing I knew, my apartment door rattled violently, as if someone or something was trying to break in. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but the screen went black. The lights flickered and died, plunging me into darkness, save for the glow from the street, where he had descended. Santa was walking now, each step deliberate, crunching the snow beneath his boots, and I could hear whispers in the wind, names of people who had died this week, spoken in voices that weren't human. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the whispers were coming closer, circling the building, and then there was a tap at my window, I forced myself to look, peering through the thin curtains, and there he was, standing below, looking up at me. In his hand, a list curled around his fingers like a snake, each name written in the same red ink as the notes. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, and then he smiled, or at least, I think it was a smile because what I saw wasn't warmth, but a grin that stretched, two white teeth sharper than they should be glowing in the cold night. "Emily," he said, his voice deep and hollow, reverberating through the empty streets. "You've been very naughty this year." I stumbled back, my mind screaming for a logical explanation, but there was none. I was frozen with fear, watching him step closer, and then the world seemed to tilt. Time slowed, each second stretching endlessly as I realized I had been waiting for this moment. Though I didn't know it, though I had hoped it wouldn't come. He raised a hand, and the list unfolded, pages flipping rapidly, stopping on my name, written large, bold, and unmistakable. The ink pulsed, almost alive, like it was drinking the fear from my blood. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, wrapped box, tied with a perfect bow. "A gift," he said, though the words sounded like it was tearing through the air, like a scream trapped in silk. I wanted to run, but the front door wouldn't budge. The walls of the apartment felt like they were closing in, and the fire alarm screamed as if warning me of the inevitable. He tossed the box toward me, and it landed on the floor with a thud that shook the building. Trembling, I approached it, and when I lifted the lid, I found a single mirror inside. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't me. It was a version of me with eyes wide, mouth open in silent terror, skin pale as snow. And behind me in the reflection, he stood impossibly close, hands outstretched. I dropped the mirror, shattering it into 1,000 pieces, and the lights flickered back on. The apartment was empty, the snow outside pristine, untouched. No footprints, no sign of him. But the next morning, the paper in my mailbox had changed. New ink, new words. "Remember, Emily, the list never forgets." I tried to tell people, tried to warn them, but who would believe me? It sounds insane, even to me. But that night and every night since, I hear the jingling. I see shadows where there shouldn't be shadows. And sometimes, when I look at the snow outside, I think I can see footprints leading straight to my door, stopping at the threshold, waiting. The entire town seems afraid to leave their homes, whispers of naughty and nice echoing through empty streets. And I know I'm not alone in this. Santa is real, and he's not bringing gifts. He's keeping a list, and if you're on it, well, he'll come for you too. People always say churches are the safest places in a town, holy ground. Protected, blessed, and maybe that's why I ignored every warning sign until it was too late, until I realized the only thing the choir at St. Delilah's was singing for was us. My name is Mariah, and the night I learned what really lived inside that church, I was seconds from becoming part of a song that no one alive should ever hear. It started the first week of December in Ridgewater, a tiny snow-drowned town in the northern United States. The kind of place where winter feels permanent and the streets go silent by 8 p.m. I had recently moved there after a bad breakup, figuring a quiet town would help me reset. I rented a small house right across from St. Delilah's Church, a tall, ancient building with stained glass windows that looked beautiful in the daytime but turned black and warped at night, like the colors were hiding something. The first time I heard the choir sing, it was past midnight. I shot awake to the faint sound of voices drifting through the cold air, singing a low, slow version of "O Holy Night." At first, I thought it was kind of peaceful, even comforting, until I realized the harmonies were wrong. They weren't humanly smooth. They dragged like someone stretching metal. And every time the voices rose, my windows vibrated softly, the glass humming as if responding to them. I looked at the clock. 12:47 a.m. No church choir rehearsed at that time, especially not in the middle of a snowstorm. The next morning, I mentioned it to my neighbor, an older woman named Grace, and the blood drained from her face. She told me the choir had been disbanded years ago after a fire during a Christmas service killed 7 members. Their bodies never fully recovered. The church had been restored, but the choir never returned. "If you heard singing," she told me, gripping my arm a little too tightly, "close your windows, lock your doors, and don't look outside." I tried to laugh it off, but her eyes were filled with fear, and fear like that isn't something people fake. That night, I jumped at every sound. At around 1:10 a.m., it started again, but this time it wasn't soft. It was loud enough that it rattled picture frames and made the air feel heavy, pressing into my chest. It wasn't just one carol, it was layered singing, multiple voices on top of each other, all singing different songs. Silent night, overlapping Carol of the Bells, overlapping something that didn't sound like any Christmas song I knew. Something deep, guttural, almost like chanting. I peeked out the window even though every instinct screamed not to. But what I saw wasn't the choir, not at first. It was the church lights flickering violently inside, like someone was walking back and forth in front of them. Then, through the stained glass, I saw silhouettes, tall, thin shapes swaying as they sang. Their bodies stretched impossibly long, their heads tilted backward as if screaming toward the ceiling instead of singing. I backed away so fast I nearly tripped. I turned all the lights off, hoping they wouldn't know I had been watching. But as the singing grew louder, a new sound joined it, whispering. At first, it sounded like it was coming from outside, but then I realized it was inside my house, crawling through the walls like insects skittering behind the plaster. My name was whispered, "Mariah, Mariah, let us in, sing with us." I covered my ears and hid under a blanket like a terrified child, but the voices only grew clearer. When the singing suddenly stopped, the silence was so intense it felt like the whole world had paused. Then, 3 sharp knocks on my front door. Not frantic knocks. Slow, rhythmic, like part of a song. I held my breath and didn't move. Another 3 knocks. Then my doorknob began to turn, not violently, not like someone breaking in, but gently, like whoever or whatever was outside expected me to open it willingly. When it finally stopped, I sat awake until sunrise, every muscle trembling. The next day, I decided I was done pretending. I walked across the street to the church, determined to get answers, or at least prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. The front door was unlocked even though a sign said closed until further notice. Inside, the air was freezing, far colder than outside, and I could see my breath even though the heaters hummed weakly. The church looked normal, too normal. Perfect rows of pews, fresh candles, the faint smell of pine. But then something caught my eye. Under the altar, hidden behind a draped cloth, I saw charred marks on the floor, burn patterns shaped like outstretched hands, dozens of them reaching upward. My stomach twisted. Before I could react, I heard a soft, dragging sound behind me, like robes sliding across the floor. When I turned, there was no one. But the singing started again inside the church this time. Faint, echoing, like it was coming from underground. I followed it like an idiot, my fear overridden by pure curiosity, down a narrow hallway and into a door leading below. The basement was pitch black, except for a single candle flickering on the far wall. And as soon as my foot touched the bottom step, the singing stopped completely. Then someone whispered right next to my ear, You heard us, I screamed and bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut and running toward the exit. But as I reached the main hall, every stained glass window went black at once, like something outside was blocking the light. Shapes began forming behind the glass faces, pressing into the colors, mouths open too wide, singing without sound. I backed away as the windows cracked, thin lines splintering outward like spider webs. The front door blew open with a violent gust that sucked the air from my lungs. I didn't even look back. I ran out, falling into the snow. That night was the worst of all. The choir didn't just sing, they surrounded my house. I saw the shadows through the curtains, tall, thin figures moving in slow circles around the building. The singing vibrated the entire structure, picture frames falling, dishes rattling, the floorboards groaning. I called the police, but the line was pure static. I tried recording the sound, but my phone shut off every time. And then they began tapping on the walls, synchronized with the rhythm of their song, like they were marking the beat with their nails. The whispers through the vents grew clearer, multiple voices saying the same thing. You went inside. Now you must join the choir. Around 3 a.m., the power went out. My house fell into perfect, suffocating darkness. Then, slowly, one by one, the shadows appeared inside, stretching along the walls, even though there was no light source to cast them. They weren't human-shaped anymore. They had elongated limbs, twisted backs, heads bent at impossible angles. They moved toward me as their voices rose in a disharmonic harmony that felt like it was shredding my sanity. I ran to the bathroom and locked myself inside, pressing my back against the door as the shadows reached under the gap, stretching closer, closer, each voice whispering my name. But just before they could touch me, the church bells rang for loud chimes and everything stopped. The shadows snapped backward, like pulled by invisible ropes. The singing ceased. The house went quiet. When the sun finally rose, they were gone. But now, every night at 1:10 a.m., the choir begins again. Louder, closer, and sometimes when I look out my window, I see them standing behind the stained glass at St. Delilah's, waiting, singing, watching my house. I know they're coming back for me. They don't forget. And one night, whether it's this Christmas or next, I know the choir will drag me into their song. And no one will ever hear from me again. If you ever get a package on your doorstep with no return address, no tracking label, and your name written in handwriting that looks older than anything modern, don't open it. I learned that too late, and now every night I sleep with the heat blasting, knowing the cold is coming for me again. My name is Haley, and the night I opened that box, my life started freezing literally. I live in northern Colorado, in a small town called Red Pines, a place where snow starts falling in October and doesn't stop until April. So, when I found a package buried in the fresh snowfall outside my cabin, I didn't think much of it. At first, it looked beautiful, wrapped in white paper with silver ribbon, almost glowing against the dark porch. But what hooked me was the note taped on top, written in delicate cursive that made my heart drop for a reason I couldn't explain. For Haley. Open before midnight. I checked the clock, 11:38 p.m. I thought it was from a friend, maybe a secret Santa thing I forgot about, so without thinking, I took it inside. That was the biggest mistake of my life. The moment the box crossed my doorway, the temperature dropped so sharply that my breath turned to fog. I joked aloud, trying to calm myself, but the cold felt wrong, heavy, almost alive. I pulled the ribbon and opened the lid. Inside was a small glass orb, about the size of a Christmas ornament, filled with swirling white frost that moved like smoke. It was freezing to the touch. Beneath it was a message. Do not let the frost escape. I remember laughing nervously because it sounded ridiculous. But then the orb cracked. Not loud, just a faint click, like thin ice breaking on a pond. A wisp of white vapor slithered out, moving across my hand and up my arm. The cold burrowed into my skin so fast I screamed, dropping the orb. It shattered on the floor. Instantly, the frost spread across the wooden boards like living veins of ice, crawling toward me. I stumbled back, slipping, and when I grabbed my arm, the skin was numb gray-blue and painfully stiff, as if frostbite had set in within seconds. I ran to the bathroom and shoved my arm under warm water, but the cold didn't fade. It pulsed beneath my skin like it was moving deeper. I barely slept that night. Even with every light on and the heater cranked to 90, the cold inside my arm gnawed at me, a slow creeping ache. When I checked the thermometer in the morning, the house was 56 degrees. The heat was still blasting, but the cold was winning. I called my best friend Lily, begging her to come over. She drove through the snowstorm and burst through my door wrapped in winter gear. The moment she stepped in, her breath fogged thickly. "Haley, why is it so cold in here?" she asked, hugging herself. I showed her the shattered orb, the frost patterns still etched into the floorboards like claws. She touched the frost and jerked back, cursing. "It's freezing," she whispered. We tried to clean it, scrape it, pour hot water over it. Nothing worked. Everywhere the frost had touched, the wood had become brittle and pale, like bone. That night things got worse. The frost on the floor began to grow again, slowly, silently, creeping along the walls like fingers searching. My windows iced over from the inside, thick layers forming within minutes. The pipes froze and burst, water spraying into the kitchen only to freeze meter into jagged icicles. I tried to leave, but when I opened the front door, a wall of frost-coated air slammed into me so painfully that my vision blurred. Something was waiting outside, something moving in the icy fog. I slammed the door shut and locked it, even though locks mean nothing against cold like that. Around 2 a.m., I heard whispering, soft, brittle voices like cracking ice. They came from the walls, the vents, the floor. I knew it sounded impossible, but the whispers were calling my name. When I looked down, the frost creeping across my arm had spread to my shoulder. My skin was pale, crystallized, tiny patterns branching like snowflakes under the surface. I could feel it crawling toward my chest. Panicking, I grabbed a kitchen knife and pressed the warm blade against the frost-covered skin, hoping the heat would stop it. Instead, the blade froze instantly, a thin crack racing down its length. Desperate, I ran to the local clinic at dawn. The doctor took one look at my arm and insisted on blood tests, skin samples, anything to make sense of it. But nothing made sense. My body temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. My heartbeat was slow, too slow. The doctor looked terrified. When she stepped out to call a specialist, the frost spread faster, and the whispers filled the exam room, louder than ever. I grabbed my coat and fled. When I looked back through the clinic window, the lights flickered and frost spread across the inside of the glass in a matter of seconds. Something was following me. Something cold. Something ancient. Back home, the frost had consumed almost everything. The walls glittered with ice. The floors crackled beneath my boots. And in the center of the living room, where the orb had shattered, something was forming a shape inside the swirling fog. A figure, tall, thin, made of jagged ice shards, its head crowned with icicle antlers. Its eyes glowed white-blue. It didn't move at first, just watched me. Then slowly its mouth opened, releasing a sound like a blizzard screaming. The whispers rushed toward me, slamming into my mind like frozen knives. The frost chooses its next home. I stumbled backward, slipping, crawling toward the door, even though I knew escape was impossible. The figure stepped forward, each movement cracking, pieces of ice falling and reforming. My breath froze on my lips, my vision dimmed. The cold burrowed deeper, reaching my lungs. I thought I was dying. Then the figure raised one hand, long, jagged fingers reaching. The frost on my arm surged forward, racing toward my heart. I screamed, or tried to, but the air froze in my throat. And then, nothing. When I woke up hours later, the house was normal again. No frost, no ice monster, no broken pipes. The orb shards were gone. My arm looked human again. I thought maybe I hallucinated everything until I saw the message written on my front window in a thin, perfect layer of frost. Not yet. Every day since, the temperature in my home drops unpredictably. Sometimes I wake up with frost on my mirror. Sometimes I see a tall, thin shape standing in the trees outside my window. And sometimes, when I'm about to fall asleep, I hear the same brittle whisper in my ear. The frost remembers you, Haley. It's only a matter of time before the cold comes back to finish what it started. And when it does, there won't be anyone left to warm me back to life.